Okay, here we go. So today, yeah, review of chapters 5 and 7. I assume that you've already read it, which you should have, basically. Or maybe because you just got your book, you haven't read it yet because you waited for your book and you're not done yet. I can understand that. That's no problem. But then make it an effort to read it yet, guys, because it's important to really have read it, since we can't read everything in class. Today, I actually wanted to review quiz 1, but since not everybody has done the quiz yet, I can't review it. Because if I review it with you, the ones who haven't done it yet would know the answers. So, yeah, I would want to review every quiz, every post test, every unit test. But if any of you hasn't done it yet, I can't review it. So that's the thing. I need you guys really to do the things on time, so we can also review the results. Yeah. Today you will do quiz 2A, and then you have, and this week quiz 2B. Now, I've changed the system because as you see at the back of your book, you have these questions. Before you read, BYR, while you read, WYR, and after you read, AWR. And so that's why I divided the quiz into 3 parts. Before you read, while you read, after you read. But it ends up being a whole lot, and I'm confused. So I changed that. So starting from quiz 3, I'm just gonna give you 1 quiz, but it's gonna be a long quiz. It's the same amount of questions if you do, for example, 2A, 2B, 2C, but it's just A, B, C compiled together in 1 quiz. Okay? Rather than having 2 shorter quizzes, and then maybe you're confused, like you forget to do it. So after 2, we'll just make it into 1 quiz. Okay? I think it's more convenient for you. So for today, you still have to do quiz 2A. Then this week at home, still do 2B. Then next week, we'll do 2C. And then after that, it will be quiz 3, which then will be in the week of the 22nd of February, we have quiz 3. Okay? So you don't have a quiz every week or every time. So I'll just put it all together. So for March, April, we only have 2 quizzes because in total there are only 5 quizzes. Okay? So it's not too much on quizzes also. Okay, remember for your post-study then to do quiz 2B in this case still, and for your pre-study, please read chapters 8 to 10. So if you haven't read them until 7 yet, can you then please still read the whole thing to make sure that you really understand what we're talking about. Now, before we continue, I'm gonna ask a few questions since we already went over a whole lot of information. Here we have the file of the literary techniques and elements. So literary devices. So the literary devices are 2 things. Number 1, literary elements. Number 2, literary techniques. Okay. So literary techniques and elements together we call devices. Now, I would like to know from Nissa, what are literary techniques? You can just open the file. No problem. Just open the file.
Yeah.
I don't expect you guys to memorize anything. I just expect from you to look things up. Don't have to memorize everything, but look it up. Have the initiative to look things up. That's it. And then by using it, in the end, you will know. Yeah. Now, as Nessa's looking, I want to add something else. Literary devices are very important because that's all what we will use for literature to do literary analysis. In order to do literary analysis, we will look at the techniques and elements. Now, what is important? 2 things. First, you've got to see them, recognize them, find them in the story, recognize them, analyze them. That's the first thing. Second, use them. So the whole idea of these devices, of these literary techniques and elements, is to find them in the text, recognize them, and being able to explain them, yeah, analyze them. And second, applying them. So whenever we're reading throughout this book, throughout this semester, we will try to see them, talk about it, understand them, analyze them. But then for your literary project, which is going to be at the end of the semester, which you have to give around May, May, that's where you will apply. That's where you have to use them and explain them. Yeah? Kind of like that. Okay, Nessa, what is it?
What is literary device?
Yeah, yeah, it's techniques and elements. So what are the techniques? What is that? What are literary techniques?
Literary techniques are specific, deliberate constructions of language which others use to convey meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we're looking
The
at,
element
huh?
and the elements too.
Yeah, boleh. What are the elements?
Okay, so literary elements are aspects or characteristic of the whole text.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Okay, now so if we're looking at techniques, we're looking, what is a technique? A technique itu cara. So basically a technique is something you do in order to achieve a certain purpose. If I were to tell you, let's eat spaghetti, there is a technique on how to eat spaghetti. Yeah, there's a technique. Europeans do not make sounds when they eat, okay? In Asia, we have people that have the custom that you can make sounds, but Europeans do not make sounds. You make sounds when you eat, you're super not polite, okay? So you don't make sounds. So there is a technique for eating spaghetti because you don't want to go. So there's a way. Now, the way to do it is, most of you probably already know, is when you put your fork into the noodles, you bring them onto your spoon, and you turn your fork until the spaghetti is rolled around the fork, and then you just put it in your mouth and nothing goes anywhere. You know, you don't have any noodles or what is it, spaghetti, you know, getting out of your mouth and dripping out of your mouth and all that kind of stuff. Because we as Westerners don't eat with a bowl close to our mouth. It's different. So there's a technique which gives us the purpose to eat spaghetti in a way that is still polite without making noise and without making a mess. So a technique itu adalah cara, sesuatu yang digunakan untuk mencapai tujuan. So in literature, the techniques will be figurative language, like here, and sensory details, with the purpose to build imagery. Techniques are used by an author. They don't have to all be used. An author can choose whatever he or she wants to use, but they use them to create effect, to create mood, atmosphere, to create a deeper underlying meaning, to create emotion. That's why it's used. Yeah? So we use figurative language and sensory details. Now, imagery, remember last week we talked about this, is the building of the visual pictures in your head. So basically, you're creating this imaginative visual in your head. Now, in order to do that, you use sensory details that appeal to your senses. So you imaginatively can see it, hear it, feel it, touch it, smell it, taste it in your head. And the figurative language brings that effect, mood, emotion, deeper underlying meaning. So these things are important, which are also referred to as descriptive devices. Yeah? Elements, though, are this. All the things that are the components, elements. If I say components, elements is bagian-bagian, sesuatu yang terdiri dari beberapa bagian, elements. So these elements need to all be there in order to get this story complete. So you need to have a setting. You need to have this conflict, this suspense, this rising action, this climax, this falling action, this resolution, this ending. You need to have characters, characterization. You need to have the protagonist, the antagonist. You need to have the theme. You need to have a mood. Yeah? So you see here that there are a lot of components that are very essential in a story for it to be a story or for it to become a very attractive, interesting story like that. Does that make sense? So those are the elements. Those are, let's say, the parts that make up a story. The techniques are basically just the means that we use in order to create deeper meaning. Now, remember last week we talked about the former idea of English was divided by, well, it's called literature. It's either fiction or nonfiction. It's fiction, it's a story, it has a plot. It's nonfiction, it's to give information, and it's formal. But nowadays, that is not the case anymore. Yeah, it has changed. into 3 different portions. So we've got literature, which now refers to fiction, the story, yeah, so long story, short stories, poetry falls into that. And then we have informational texts, yeah, those are the non-fiction ones. Those are to gain knowledge, so those are the formal ones, textbooks, newspapers, all that kind of writing. And then we've got a hybrid. The hybrid of literature and informational text is called literary nonfiction, or also called narrative nonfiction. So that is basically facts written like a story. So it's factual information which is written in story format, but it doesn't have a setting, it doesn't have a plot, it doesn't have a conflict, it doesn't have a climax, it doesn't. But it's story-like written. It's the author, how the author writes it is more interactive with the audience. It's more like a story, but the information is factual. And a lot of articles right now are written like that, especially with the internet. We've got a lot that is uploaded and posted and found on the internet that is written very narrative nonfiction-like. Yeah. So yeah. So if you informational text, really your textbook from school, reports and all that, yeah? So please understand these differences. Okay, now, the difference already about that. So we're gonna get into our summary. Remember your arc, yeah, I already wrote it down. Just, you know, look at this information. Just go into it and look at it. Remember also, we still have the video here. So if you want to see more of that, you can see more of that. Go into that as well. Now, for Spark Notes. We love Spark Notes. Spark Notes are good. As we go to the summary, basically, today we're going to review 5 till 7. So we did already 1 to 4, and we could see that from chapter 1 to 4, it was more about the setting of the story. In chapters 1 to 4, right. Okay. In chapter 4, it's the end of the setting. Chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 basically give the beginning and show the setting, what is Wuthering Heights and what is what are the 2 families, what are the 2 places. Now basically, as you remember, as a recap, Lockwood is a guy who writes, and he comes to the estate, which is close to Wuthering Heights, basically. If you, here's the name, Thrush-Cross Grange. So Lockwood is a writer. He rents the place Thrush-Cross Grange. He wants to live there and rents the place for a while. And then when he's there, Mr. Heathcliff, who owns the estate, comes by to see who the new tenant is, who's renting my place. He wants to know. So they talk a bit, and then Mr. Heathcliff invites him to come to Wuthering Heights. So the next day, Mr. Lockwood goes to Wuthering Heights to meet Mr. Heathcliff, but he finds it a weird place. He finds Mr. Heathcliff not friendly, and then the servants are weird, and it's all weird. And he doesn't really like it. And after having met, he wants to go back to Thrush-Cross Grange. But then he got hit by a heavy snowstorm. And then he cannot continue his way back to Grange. So he has to go back to Wuthering Heights, spends the night. But during that night, he gets a visit from the ghost, the spirit of Catherine. And so the next day, he goes back to Thrush-Cross Grange, but he gets sick because of the snowstorm he had been in. Then he gets sick, and during his illness, he's in bed, His helper, Nellie, is the one who kind of tells Mr. Lockwood the story from the beginning until the end. Yeah? So here in 4 it says, having rejected human contact the day before, Lockwood now becomes lonely when when his housekeeper Nellie Dean brings him his supper. He bids her to sit and tell him the story of the people at Wuthering Heights. Now, she attempts to clarify the family relationships, explaining that the young Catherine whom Lockwood met at Wuthering Heights is the daughter of the Catherine who was Nellie's first mistress at Wuthering Heights. Yeah, so there is the big Catherine and the small Catherine. The older Catherine is the one who will be friends with Heathcliff, like step siblings. The younger Catherine is the daughter. So, yeah. And that Hareton Earnshaw is young Catherine's cousin. So these are already the kids, yeah? The nephew of the first Catherine. So we have basically 2 families, Earnshaw. Yeah, the Earnshaw family. Mr. and Mrs. Earnshaw have 2 children. One is Catherine and one is Hindley. And they adopt a son who is Heathcliff. So 3. But Heathcliff is adopted. Yeah? He's a gypsy. He's colored skin and he's, in the eyes of the mother and the siblings, is disgusted. Although Heathcliff and Catherine become close. And then there's the other family, which is called Linton. Now, the Linton family lives in Truscross Grange. They also have 2 children, Isabella and the other kid. I forgot. Yeah, so 2 kids. Like that. That's how it goes. And they grow up. And then they have children like that. Okay? Now, young Catherine is the last of the Lintons, and Hareton is the last of the Earnshaws. And Nellie says that she grew up as a servant at Wuthering Heights alongside Catherine and her brother Hindley. Those are Mr. Earnshaw's children. And then in chapter 5, we go there now. Let me go there. Oops. 5, 6. We go to look at chapter 6 as an overview. So you remember and have a bit of an idea what we're talking about. Then in chapter 6, Hindley and his new wife. So Hindley goes away basically. So Mr. Earnshaw adopts Heathcliff, and Hindley doesn't like Heathcliff. He's jealous. He's the only son, and Mr. Earnshaw really, really loves Heathcliff. His wife hates Heathcliff because he's dark and he's dirty and he's not mannered. He was a poor boy. So Mr. Earnshaw really loves Heathcliff. And so Hindley, his son, is jealous. So he doesn't like Heathcliff because he feels that his father loves Heathcliff more than he loves him. So Hindley at one point is sent away. And then when he comes for college, and because Hindley and Heathcliff are fighting all the time, so Mr. Earnshaw sends him away. He goes to college. Then he gets married there and comes back and brings his new wife. And that is actually at the time when Mr. Earnshaw has died. Yeah? Mrs. Earnshaw dies very early on in the story when Hindley and Catherine are still small. And then later on, Mr. Earnshaw dies. Now, Hindley immediately begins to take revenge on Heathcliff. So he says then at that moment when Mr. Earnshaw dies, Heathcliff is not supposed to be in the house anymore. He cannot be educated anymore. He has to become a servant and work very hard. Catherine and Heathcliff are still good friends. They've always been kind of close. But then it's funny, they kind of, she tries to escape from Hindley's notice to still, have time together to play around. Whereas actually, Hindley really doesn't want Catherine to hang out with Heathcliff. Now, one evening when Heathcliff and Catherine disappear, Hindley orders that the doors should be locked so they cannot be back in the house. Now, Nellie still waits for them and then receives shock when Heathcliff returns alone. He then tells that Catherine made the trip to Truscross Grange to spy on and tease Edgar and Isabel. So the Linton kids are Edgar and Isabel. So they want to tease them. But before they could succeed to do that, the guard dog kind of attacks them and bites Catherine's ankle. So Catherine cannot go back. She needs to stay. And she was taken care of at Truscross Grange by the servant. But the Lintons, Mr. and Mrs. Linton, who live in Truscross Grange, really do not like Heathcliff because he looks rough, not taken care of, dirty, uneducated, kasar gitu loh. So they don't allow Heathcliff to stay with Catherine and especially not come close to their own children, Isabel and Edgar. Yeah, so that's why Heathcliff had to go back. Anyways, after Mr. Linton comes to Wuthering Heights to explain the situation, and he says that he doesn't like how Heathcliff is because he sees that it makes Catherine kasar juga. So Catherine is not a lady because she hangs out with Heathcliff. So Hindley, Catherine's brother, is humiliated by what Mr. Linton said and becomes very angry at Heathcliff and tells Heathcliff, you can never ever be around my sister again. And then somehow Catherine is sent back to the Grange to stay there, and Mrs. Linton will help teach Catherine to become a lady since her mom died when she was little, right? So teaching her all the manners and social graces. Then after weeks, Catherine returns back to Wuthering Heights, looks all pretty, and Hindley says that Heathcliff can only say hi like a servant, but cannot be to her like a stepbrother or like a friend. So he needs to keep his distance. And then they all come together, and then they, what is it? He says then he meets Hindley and says to him that he looks dirty and that he is not. Oh, then he meets Catherine, and Catherine says, well, Heathcliff, you look dirty, you're not clean, you don't behave well. And Heathcliff, sepertinya sakit hati. Dulu teman baik gitu loh, sekarang kok diginiin. Now I'm not good enough for you anymore since you have become well educated and a lady. What? No, I don't count anymore. So he goes to his room. He's really angry. Now, the Linton children come for dinner at Wuthering Heights, and then Nellie helps Heathcliff to wash himself up, to put on new clothes, yeah, so he can pretend to be good. So Mrs. Linton still doesn't want her children, Edgar and Isabel, to see Heathcliff because she finds Heathcliff, yeah, not good at all. Yeah, so Heathcliff is locked up at the attic until the end of the dinner. Yeah. So they actually, the boy, what is it? The boy, Edgar, the boy, Linton's boy, makes fun of Heathcliff's hair and how he looks. And that makes Heathcliff only more angry. Like, why is everybody teasing me? It's like bullying, basically. Yeah, they're bullying him. That's basically what they're doing. So he's really fed up with it. Yeah, Catherine goes up to see him and to give him food. And then, yeah, and Heathcliff says, I don't care. Pokoknya, I've been bullied all this time. I'm going to get my revenge. Like, I can't help it. I am of different color, right? And he was poor. I mean, like, he had no parents. So what can he do? Now, at this point, Nellie interrupts her story and she rises to go, remarking that the night is going long. But Lockwood says, like, please stay. Please tell me the rest of the story. So this is really where Nellie is telling her story of the start of the two families, Earnshaw, who lived in Wuthering Heights with the two children, Catherine and Hindley, and the adopted son, Heathcliff, and the family of Linton, who lives in Truscross Grange with the children, Edgar and Isabel. Please get that picture, then you will understand the following story. If you got this in your head, it'll be fine. If you don't understand this, it's going to be challenging. Okay. Now, let's go to, you can open your book. You got your book, right? Which is really cool. Let me see if I get to get. Already have it open, I think. Oh, I don't see it. Okay, wait a second, guys. I don't see my file. Let me open my file first. Oh, no wonder. Ha! It's closed. Okay, wait a sec, yeah, guys. I'm gonna open my file. You can just open your own book, but I'm just gonna open it here too to know where we are at. So that is chapter 5, yeah? Oh, interesting. Here we go. Okay, yay, there we are. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So part 2, the first Catherine, told by Mrs. Ellen, who is called Nellie in the story, housekeeper at Frost Cross Grange and formerly servant at Wuthering Heights. So she was at Wuthering Heights before, that's why she knows. Okay, we're going to start with the first one. I'd like to ask Alan to start reading with us. You can just read from your book, though.
Alan apa Alan?
Oh, Stephen Allen.
Oh, from chapter 5, right?
Yeah, chapter 5, page 15.
Chapter 5, The Unwanted Stranger. Wuthering Heights was built by Ershaw about 300 years ago, and until recently it remained the family home. Before I came to live at the Grange, I was almost always at the Heights. Because when I was a baby, my mother was nurse to Hindley Earnshaw, who was Harton's father. As a child, I often played with the children, Hindley and Catherine. I did little jobs too and helped on the farm when I was asked to. One fine summer morning, Mr. Earnshaw, the old master, came downstairs for a journey. After he had told Joseph what had to be done during the day, he turned to his children and asked what he should bring them from the port of Liverpool. But he said it must be something small, as he intend to walk there and back, which was 60 miles each way. Hindley asked for a drum, and Katie chose it, although she was hardly 6 years old. She could ride any horse on the farm. He then gives his children goodbye and set out. It seemed a long time.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. So the dad is gonna go and wants to buy his kids something. So he asks, "Okay, guys, what gift do you want me to bring?" Yeah, basically like that. Okay, Gilbert, can you continue?
Yes, Miss. Dari It Seemed ya?
Yeah.
It seemed a long time to us all, the 3 days of his absence. Mrs. Earnshaw expected him by supper time on the third evening, and she delayed the meal hour after, but there was no sign of his coming. It became dark, and she would have sent the children to bed, but they begged sadly to stay up. Just about 11 o'clock, the door opened and the master stepped in. He threw himself into a chair laughing, and then he opened his big coat, which he held wrapped up in his arms. "See here, wife, you must take this as a gift of God, though it's as dark as if it came from the devil."
Okay, thank you. Okay, though it is dark as if it came from the devil. Who are they talking about?
Heathcliff?
Yeah, Heathcliff. It's a boy. As dark as it came from the devil. That is a comparison, yeah? So the boy is compared, the darkness of the boy is compared to the devil. The darkness of what? Skin color. So it's referred to the kid as really dark, and it's like as if it comes from the devil, as dark as. It smiles as, it is as dark as. It would be like a simile, yeah? A simile comparing the skin color of Heathcliff to the devil. Oh my God, really? That's so sad. Okay, Mita, can you continue?
We crowded round and over Catherine's head. I had a view of a dirty, black-haired child in torn clothes. It was big enough both to walk and talk. In fact, its face looked older than Catherine's. But when it was placed on its feet, it only started around and repeated some sounds that nobody could understand.
Okay, stop first. Do you see what pronoun they're using to refer to the boy? Do they use he? Does it use he?
It.
Yeah, it uses it. It we use for objects and animals, plants. We don't use it for humans. What does that mean? What does that say? Why does the writer use the pronoun it to refer to the boy? Why not he?
Because they don't see him as human.
Very good.
That's me.
Yeah. And why do you think? That's a very good point. Why do you think that they don't see him as a human?
Because he's a different color, because he's not white.
Yeah. Low level, low standard. Dark, uneducated, poor, not from our kasta, yeah? Not from our level. No. That cannot mix. That's why they refer to it as it. Boy, that's so offensive, right? Really, really bad. Okay, keep reading. Who was reading just now? I cut you off.
Me, miss.
Huh? Yeah,
Me.
continue.
I was frightened and Mr. Earnshaw was ready to throw it out of doors. The master had seen it dying of hunger and homeless and unestablished in the streets of Liverpool. No one knew to whom it belonged. He was determined not to leave it, so, his time and money being limited, he thought it better to take it straight home with him. I was told to wash it, give it clean clothes, and let it sleep with the children.
Yeah, very good. Steffi, can you continue?
Hindley and Kathy were happy to look and listen until they both began searching their father's pocket for their presents. He had promised them. Hindley was a boy of 14, but when he took out what had been a drum, now broken to bits, he wept aloud. And Kathy, when she learned that the master had lost her wit in looking after the stranger, showed her temper by making ugly faces at the little thing.
And received?
And received a blow from her father. They refused to have the child in their room, and so I put it outside on the stairs, hoping it might be gone in the morning. It crept to Mr. Earnshaw's door, and there he found it. As a punishment for my unkindness, I was sent out of the house.
Yeah, this is really mean though, yeah? That they'll treat the boy like that though. Oh my goodness. What can you guys say about Catherine and Hindley's behavior as a child? What kind of character do they have? This is called characterization, giving details about the character in the story that basically tells something about the child. What can you guys say about Hindley and Kathy? Seeing how they respond. Yes, go ahead.
Uncaring.
What?
Uncaring.
Uncaring. Why? Please explain. Remember, everything needs to be explained.
Because they don't want Heathcliff in their room, and so they let him outside their room, and I don't think sleeping nearby stairs is comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Not safe. Very good. Thank you. Other than that, is there another thing it can say about the character? So I'm caring about the character of the two kids, Catherine and Hindley. Anything else?
Can I?
Yes?
They think only about themselves.
Yes. Selfish, yeah?
Yes.
Correct. And maybe also the word spoiled. Does that make sense to you? Because they were promised a gift and they couldn't find the gift and got very angry. Whereas if you look at it, they see a boy who has no mom and dad, who's super poor, lived on the street, was dying because of hunger and cold, and they just think about their game or their present. So yeah, spoiled in a way as well, I think. Yeah. Wow. In that time, there were a lot in 17 and 1800s. There were a lot of poor people who would just die on the streets of hunger. All that changed later on, centuries later. But at that time, there were a lot of people who were also homeless and just couldn't eat. Okay, Angeline. Angeline, can you continue reading?
Okay. From where?
Where were we at? Yeah. Thrown out of the house. So on returning.
Okay. On returning a few days later, I found they had called the child Heathcliff. It was the name of a son of the Earnshaws who had died in childhood, and it has served him ever since as both first and last name. Miss Catley and he were now very friendly, but Hindley hated him, and the mistress never said a word when she saw him badly treated.
Yeah,
He
because Mrs. Hindley didn't Mrs. Hindley Mrs. Linton did not like Heathcliff. She didn't want him. So whenever her son Hindley would hit Heathcliff, she would just allow it. The only one who really cared for Heathcliff was the dad, Mr. Earnshaw, and Catherine. Okay, continue, Angeline.
he seemed a patient, unsmiling child used, perhaps, to unkindness, who would suffer Hindley's blows without complaint. When Mr. Earnshaw discovered his son hitting the poor fatherless child, as he called him, he was furious. He became strangely fond of Heathcliff, far more than of Catherine, who was too strong-willed and naughty to be a favorite.
Yeah, thank you. Very well done. Yeah. Okay, Joseph Justin, from the beginning.
Okay. From the beginning, Heathcliff caused bad feeling, and by the time Mrs. Earnshaw died 2 years later, the young master had begun to think of his father as hard and unkind, and of Heathcliff as the thief his father loved. I often ask myself what my master saw to admire so much in the unpleasant boy, who never, as far as I remember, showed any signs of being grateful for the fond treatment he received. I remember Mr. Earnshaw once bought a pair of horses for the boys. Heathcliff took the final one, but it soon hurt its foot. When he discovered this, he said to Hindley, "You must exchange horses with me, or I'll tell your father of the 3 beatings you've given me this week." Hindley threatened him with an iron weight. "Throw it," said Heathcliff, "and I'll tell how you said that you would turn me out of doors as soon as he died, and we'll see whether he won't turn you out immediately." He threw it, hitting him on the chest and knocking him over. He was up again at once, breathless and pale, and if I hadn't prevented it, he would have gone to the master and got full revenge.
Yes, thank you. Because Mr. Earnshaw would believe Heathcliff, yeah? So basically, that is really bad. Before, Mrs. Earnshaw would always protect Hindley, but she was dead already, so nobody was there to protect, right? Oh boy. Chris, can you continue?
when from it.
Take my horse, you dirty gypsy.
Take my horse, you dirty gypsy, said young Heinrich, and I pray he may break your neck. Heathcliff had gone to make possession of the animal, when Henley finished his speech by knocking him over. I was surprised to see how calmly the child picked himself up. I persuaded him to let me lay the blame for the marks left by Heinleigh's blows on the house, and he did not mind what story was told, since he had got what he wanted.
Yeah, so you can see here also very clear behavior of Heathcliff. Yeah, Hindley treats Heathcliff bad. He, what is that? Hits him and all. But Heathcliff becomes kasar juga, you know, like he knows that he can take things, but maybe also because he's fed up with the fact that he's constantly bullied and hurt, yeah? Alan? Alan? Alan, you're next. Okay, no Alan. Kalista?
Yes.
Kalista, can you continue reading?
Chapter 6.
Yeah.
Henley becomes master. In the course of time, Mr. Earnshaw had begun to feel his strength left him suddenly, and he became easily annoyed. He got it into his head that because he liked Heathcliff, everyone in the boy wished to do him harm. It was a disadvantage to young Heathcliff because as we didn't wish to upset the master. We all except his son, gave in to him, and this was an encouragement to the boy's pride and bad temper. Hindley's expressions of scorn moved his father to fury. Mr. Earnshaw would seize his stick to strike him, and shake with anger at his own helplessness.
Okay, I want to ask, thank you very much. I want to ask, what does it mean it was a disadvantage to young Heathcliff? What does that refer to? What is that talking about? What disadvantage is this?
Achilles heel.
Huh? Come again?
Disadvantage, right?
Yeah.
Something like Achilles heel.
Yeah. What is the disadvantage talking about? How is there a disadvantage to young Heathcliff? And then refer that to here, the boy's pride and black temper. It was a disadvantage to young Heathcliff because as we didn't want to wish to upset the master, we all, except his son, gave in to him. And this was an encouragement to the boy's pride and black temper. So a disadvantage maybe also because Heathcliff's whole personality and character started changing as well, right? He could play it in such a way so he got what he wanted and that Hindley would get the fall for it, right? Does that make sense? Everybody hated Heathcliff. They refer to Heathcliff as the boy, right? So it was a disadvantage because at one point it encouraged Heathcliff's pride and black temper, you know? He started changing because he knew that Mr. Earnshaw was on his side. So he could do kind of whatever. That is something though. Okay, we're going to continue reading. Yeah. Rafael, can you continue?
Yes. Where was the last one?
On top, at last.
At last, a friend of our employer, who earned some money by teaching the young Lintons and Earnshaws, advised that Hindley should be sent away to college, and Mr. Earnshaw agreed, though with a heavy heart.
Continue.
I hoped we would have peace now, and so we might have, except that Miss Cathy and Joseph were just as bad. Night after night, the old servant had a string of complaints against Heathcliff and Cathy. As for Cathy, certainly She had ways such as I never saw in a child before. She put us out of patience 50 times and more in a day. From the hour she came downstairs until the hour she went to bed, we hadn't a minute's rest from her naughtiness. Her spirits were always high, her tongue was always going, singing, laughing, interrupting everybody. She was a wild, wicked young thing, but she had the prettiest eye and sweetest smile, and lightest foot in our part of the country. And after all, I think she meant no harm. She was much too fond of Heathcliff. The greatest punishment we could invent for her was to keep her separated from him.
Thank you. Awesome. Very good. Yeah, we continue. The hour, William?
The hour that came at last that ended Mr. Earnshaw's troubles on earth. He died quietly in his chair one October evening. Mr. Hindley came home from the funeral, and a thing that set the neighbors whispering. He brought a wife. Uh, what she was and where she was born, he never informed us. Probably she had neither money nor name, or he would never have kept his marriage secret from his father. She was rather thin but young and fresh, and her eyes were bright as diamonds. I did not notice. It is true that going upstairs made her breathe rather fast, and that she coughed rather badly sometimes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, Kadek Dwi?
Young Earnshaw had changed during the 3 years of his absence. He spoke and dressed quite differently. His wife expressed pleasure at having Katy as a sister, kissed her and gave her quantities of presents. Her love for her new sister didn't last very long, though, and a few words from her, mentioning a dislike for Heathcliff, were enough to stir up in her husband all his former hate for the boy. He drove him from the company to the servants, stopped his education, and made him work as hard as any other boy on the farm.
Yeah. Who is young Earnshaw? What's the name of young Earnshaw? If they mention that, who are they referring to? Anyone?
Is Henry?
Yeah, Hindley. Very good. Yeah. Amelia, can you read one more?
From Heathcliff.
Yeah.
Heathcliff bore his treatment fairly well at first because Katy taught him all she learned and worked or played with him in the field. They were both growing up quite wild and without manners, since the young master did not care how they behaved as long as they kept away from him. One of their chief amusement was to run away to the moon in the
The
morning and
Moors.
remain
Mm-mm.
there all day. The punishment that followed was only something to be laughed at. They forgot everything the minute they were together again.
Yeah, so Catherine and Heathcliff were really like best friends, best buddies, like step sips. Yeah, like just little kids who are just having fun, like really enjoying life and not thinking about anything and being punished. Well, what the heck? Who cares? We'll do it again anyways. Like that kind of worryless life. Okay, this goes on by a bit more, and then it reaches to chapter 7, which you also should read. Yeah. Okay, please make sure that you have all this read, because for next week, basically, you would have to have done your, what is that called? 8 until 10. Oops, wrong sharing. Wait, oh, where did that go? Okay, wait a second. There we go. Nah, This is it. So basically, for next week, as we will review chapters 8 till 10, it's therefore very important that you will read them for next week's Zoom meeting. And loading is real. Oh, why is this taking long? Okay, just keep that in mind. You can look again at the schedule just to make sure for yourself. Oh yeah. Yeah, chapters 8 until 5 till 7 reviewed, 8 till 10, correct. So read 8 till 10 for next week. Are there any questions? No? Can I remind class secretary to give me the attendance for both classes, IPA 1 and IPA 2? Yeah? Okay, have a great weekend, guys. Enjoy your Saturday and your Sunday. God bless you, and I will see you next week, okay?